Imagine, just for a moment, that the world you see around you, the colors, shapes, sounds, even the sense of time, isn't an objective reality. Instead, it's a carefully constructed experience, unique to each individual, created by a blend of sensory inputs and the mind's own interpretations. Everything you know about reality, the people you see, the places you know, even your very sense of self, depends on a complex web of perception. But what if this reality isn't as concrete as it seems? What if our minds shape it in ways we've barely begun to understand? In today's video, we're going to dive into one of the most fascinating questions of all. How much of what we experience is real, and how much is simply our brain's best guess at what's out there? From optical illusions to altered states of consciousness, and even the surprising ways memories can shape what we think we see, our journey through perception will take us into the science, the philosophy, and the mysteries of how we experience life. So sit back, open your mind, and get ready to question the very nature of reality itself. Let's begin by examining one of the most overlooked aspects of human experience: the assumption that what we see, hear, and feel is an accurate reflection of an objective reality. We tend to believe that our senses provide us with a direct window into the world, one that is consistent, reliable, and unwavering. But the truth is far more complex. Science reveals that our senses are not objective tools, but are instead interpreters, prone to errors, illusions, and even profound distortions. This realization challenges the very foundations of our reality, exposing how deeply perception shapes everything we know. To start, let's look at vision, the sense we rely on most for understanding our surroundings. Our eyes take in light, sending signals to the brain, which then constructs an image. But this image is not simply a photograph of the world. It's a composite formed by the brain's interpretations, predictions, and assumptions. Our brains are constantly filtering, selecting, and discarding information based on past experiences, context, and even cultural conditioning. When you look at a landscape, your brain isn't merely processing colors and shapes. It's drawing on your memories and knowledge, filling in details to make sense of what you see. Think about optical illusions. These are powerful demonstrations of how perception can easily be deceived. A classic example is the Mueller-Lyer illusion, where two lines of the same length appear different because of the direction of the arrows at their ends. Although you know intellectually that the lines are the same, your perception disagrees. This discrepancy exposes the brain's tendency to apply rules and shortcuts when interpreting visual information, revealing that what we perceive isn't always a perfect match with reality. Optical illusions highlight a profound truth. What we see is shaped by how our brain interprets sensory data, sometimes distorting it for efficiency or context. The same principle applies to our other senses. Take hearing, for instance. Auditory perception is similarly susceptible to context and interpretation. Our brains process sounds based on previous experiences, filling in missing pieces or adjusting frequencies to match expectations. This phenomenon is particularly evident in something called the phonemic restoration effect, where our brain fills in missing sounds in speech. If a syllable is removed from a sentence, we often don't notice because our brain simply reconstructs the missing sound. This isn't just a minor adjustment, it's the mind actively creating part of our auditory experience. Then there's touch, another sense we often consider a direct channel to the outside world. But even touch is subject to interpretation. A simple example is the rubber hand illusion. When participants see a rubber hand being stroked in sync with their own hidden hand, many feel as though the rubber hand is part of their body. This phenomenon reveals how malleable our sense of physical self can be, demonstrating that even our bodily awareness is a construct that can be manipulated. Our brain relies on a combination of visual and tactile cues to create a coherent sense of body ownership, and when these cues conflict, reality can be surprisingly flexible. Another powerful illustration of perception's influence on reality comes from the concept of pareidolia, our tendency to see patterns, especially faces, where none exist. Think about the famous face on Mars or the ability to spot animal shapes in clouds. This inclination stems from the brain's hardwired preference for recognizing patterns, especially those that hint at familiar shapes. It's a survival trait, allowing us to detect faces quickly, but it also means we're constantly projecting meaning onto randomness. This projection isn't just a harmless quirk, it reveals how we construct reality based on what we expect or want to see, sometimes finding significance where there is none. Perception's influence extends even to time. Our experience of time is far from uniform or absolute. Think of how a joyful day seems to fly by, while a period of anxiety stretches endlessly. Studies suggest that time perception is closely tied to attention and emotions. When we focus intensely on an experience or engage with something unfamiliar, time seems to slow down. Conversely, when we're in familiar situations, the brain compresses time, leading to the speed-up effect. Our experience of time is subjective, shaped by both biological rhythms and psychological states, illustrating once again that perception sculpts our experience. Memory, too, plays a crucial role in shaping perception. When we recall an event, we often think of memories as accurate recordings. However, neuroscience has shown that memory is highly reconstructive. Each time we remember something, our brain rebuilds the memory, sometimes adding details that weren't there or omitting parts. This reconstruction process can alter the way we perceive the past, which in turn influences how we interpret the present. Our memories, in this way, act as a filter, coloring current experiences with shades of previous ones. Our perceptions are also significantly shaped by social and cultural factors. From childhood, we are influenced by the beliefs, values, and expectations of our surroundings. These cultural frameworks play a profound role in shaping how we interpret the world. In some cultures, for example, people may view certain colors as symbols of luck or danger, altering how those colors are perceived in different contexts. Social norms can also impact how we respond to people's facial expressions or interpret body language, further shaping our subjective experience of reality. Consider how our expectations influence perception through something called the placebo effect. This phenomenon reveals how powerful our beliefs are in shaping reality. When someone believes that a pill will relieve their pain, they often report feeling better, even if the pill contains no active ingredient. The brain releases natural chemicals that alleviate discomfort, simply based on expectation, illustrating the mind's ability to alter physical experience. The placebo effect is a striking reminder that what we expect can often become what we experience. In understanding perception, it's also essential to acknowledge its limits. We are surrounded by an overwhelming amount of sensory information at all times, yet we only consciously perceive a small fraction. The brain must filter out much of what we see, hear, and feel to focus on what's relevant. This selective filtering means that we're constantly editing reality, often without realizing it. Our perception is a lens that focuses on certain details while leaving others in the periphery, shaping a version of reality that's unique to each person. Taken together, these examples reveal that perception isn't simply a window to reality, but a filter that shapes our experience at every moment. We tend to think of our senses as neutral transmitters of information, yet each sense has its own set of biases, assumptions, and expectations. The reality we experience is therefore not an objective truth but a subjective construct, influenced by biology, psychology, and even our social environment. This realization challenges us to question everything we take for granted, from the solidity of objects to the flow of time. By understanding perception's role in shaping reality, we begin to see that our everyday experiences are not as straightforward as they seem. Our world is a blend of external stimuli and internal interpretation, creating a reality that is unique, subjective, and deeply personal. This insight opens the door to a greater awareness of the complexity of human experience and a deeper appreciation for the intricate workings of the mind. In the grand scheme, perception teaches us that reality is, in many ways, a personal creation. Each of us navigates the world with a distinct lens, shaped by individual experiences, memories, and expectations. This recognition not only challenges our understanding of truth, but also invites us to approach life with greater curiosity and humility, knowing that our reality is just one among countless others. Perception, as remarkable as it seems, is not an effortless feat, but rather a marvel of complex, interwoven processes happening within the brain. From the moment light enters the eye or a sound wave reaches the ear, countless neural pathways work to decode, interpret, and respond to these signals. Sensory perception transforms raw data into meaningful experiences that guide our understanding of the world around us. Let's delve into how the brain accomplishes this incredible task. The journey of perception begins when stimuli from the environment, such as light, sound, or touch, interact with specialized sensory receptors. These receptors convert external signals into electrical impulses that travel through sensory neurons to the brain. Each sense has unique pathways and processing centers. For example, visual information travels through the optic nerve to the visual cortex, while auditory signals move along the auditory nerve to the auditory cortex. Once in the brain, these sensory signals don't immediately translate into conscious perception. Instead, they pass through a series of processing stages where different brain regions analyze various aspects of the stimuli. Visual processing, for instance, begins in the retina, where light-sensitive cells called rods and cones detect color, brightness, and motion. This initial information is basic and requires further refinement in the visual cortex, where neurons interpret shapes, edges, and spatial orientation, giving rise to a coherent image of the environment. The auditory process follows a similar pathway but with unique structures. Sound waves are converted into neural signals within the cochlea, a spiral-shaped organ in the inner ear. These signals then travel to the brainstem and auditory cortex, where different aspects of sound, pitch, volume, and direction are analyzed separately and then integrated to form a full soundscape. Our ability to differentiate voices in a crowded room or recognize the timbre of a favorite song is a testament to the brain's remarkable auditory processing capabilities. In addition to the primary processing areas, the brain relies heavily on associative regions to make sense of sensory input. For instance, the parietal lobe integrates information from multiple senses, helping us understand our position in space and allowing for coordinated actions. The temporal lobe is another critical player, particularly for recognizing patterns and processing complex stimuli like faces and language. These associative areas work in tandem with primary sensory regions, creating a unified perception of the world. One of the most fascinating aspects of sensory processing is its adaptability. Neural plasticity, or the brain's ability to rewire itself, allows sensory systems to adjust based on experience and environmental demands. For example, when individuals lose one sense, like sight or hearing, their brain often reallocates resources to strengthen other senses. This adaptability highlights the dynamic nature of perception, as the brain continually adjusts its processing strategies to optimize sensory information. Beyond basic processing, perception is also heavily influenced by factors like attention, memory, and expectation. Attention acts as a filter, directing the brain's resources to particular stimuli while ignoring others. This selective attention is essential for navigating environments with multiple sources of sensory information. Imagine trying to read a book in a noisy cafe. Your brain focuses on the text while filtering out background noise, a process that enables effective concentration. Memory and prior knowledge also play a substantial role in perception. When we encounter a familiar object, the brain uses stored information to interpret it more efficiently. This phenomenon is known as top-down processing, where the brain uses past experiences to influence current perception. Conversely, bottom-up processing occurs when we encounter something new, and the brain relies on sensory data alone to form an understanding. The interplay between these two processes allows us to navigate both familiar and unfamiliar situations with ease. Expectation is another powerful factor in perception, often shaping what we perceive in ways that may not align with reality. When the brain anticipates a certain outcome, it adjusts its sensory processing to match those expectations. This effect is evident in phenomena like the placebo effect, where the expectation of relief can lead to actual improvements in physical health. The brain's reliance on expectation reveals its tendency to construct reality based on predictions rather than objective data alone. The science of perception also underscores the remarkable efficiency of the brain's processing abilities. Despite the vast amount of sensory data we encounter every second, the brain processes only a fraction of it. This efficiency is partly due to mechanisms like sensory gating, which filters out redundant or irrelevant information, allowing us to focus on what's essential. Without this filtering, the brain would be overwhelmed by sensory input, leading to confusion and cognitive overload. Neuroscientific research continues to uncover the layers of complexity within perception, including the role of neurotransmitters, brainwaves, and neural synchrony. Neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin influence how we interpret sensory information, particularly in relation to mood and motivation. Brainwave patterns also play a part, as different frequencies are associated with various states of awareness. For instance, beta waves are linked to active, engaged perception, while alpha waves are associated with relaxed, passive observation. One emerging area of research in perception science is the role of predictive coding. This theory suggests that the brain constantly generates predictions about incoming sensory data and updates these predictions based on new information. Predictive coding allows the brain to process information more efficiently by focusing only on discrepancies between expected and actual sensory input. This framework not only helps explain perceptual illusions, but also offers insights into how the brain maintains stability in a constantly changing environment. Furthermore, the science of perception has significant implications for understanding consciousness. Perception provides a window into the mechanisms of conscious awareness, as it reflects the brain's ability to create a coherent, continuous experience from fragmented sensory data. Studying perception brings us closer to understanding how consciousness emerges from the complex interplay of neural processes, offering clues to the age-old question of how subjective experience arises. As we explore the science of perception, we're reminded of the brain's remarkable capacity for constructing reality. Through a combination of sensory processing, attention, memory, and prediction, the brain shapes a unique, personalized version of the world for each individual. This realization challenges us to reconsider the boundaries of reality and the role our minds play in defining what we perceive as truth. Perception isn't just how we see things, it's the lens through which we experience the world. It's through perception that we construct our version of reality, interpreting everything from the simple task of recognizing a face to complex processes like understanding time or emotions. But what exactly is this reality we speak of, and how much of it is truly real? In this chapter, we'll explore how perception influences the way we define what's real and how our brains work to shape the reality we navigate each day. We'll look at the limitations of our sensory systems, how our mental framework organizes the world, and the profound impact that perception can have on our beliefs, actions, and worldview. The first step to understanding how perception shapes our reality is to acknowledge its limitations. Our sensory systems, sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell, are designed to give us information about the world, but they do so with constraints. These senses are not infallible, and their scope is limited in many ways. For instance, our eyes can only perceive a small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, limiting our ability to see ultraviolet or infrared light. Similarly, our ears can only detect certain frequencies of sound, leaving entire ranges of audio beyond our perception. Moreover, our brains actively filter and prioritize certain sensory information while disregarding others. This is crucial because without this filtering, we would be overwhelmed by the constant barrage of stimuli. However, it also means that we're only getting a fraction of what's really out there. In some sense, our reality is built upon what we are able to sense and what our brain has been wired to perceive as important. Consider the phenomenon of visual illusions. We all know that sometimes what we see isn't truly what's there. Take, for example, the optical illusion of the rubber hand experiment, where participants experience the sensation of touch on a rubber hand, even though the real hand is hidden from view. The brain's ability to combine visual cues with touch information can make the rubber hand feel like it's part of the body, even though we know logically it's not. This trickery demonstrates that perception isn't always a perfect reflection of reality. It's an interpretation, sometimes misleading, based on incomplete or manipulated information. Once our senses relay information, the brain doesn't simply present it as is. Instead, it processes that information and organizes it into patterns, creating a coherent mental model of the world. This mental model is what we rely on to navigate our environment and make decisions. Our mental models are influenced by many factors, including our upbringing, culture, and personal experiences. The way we perceive a social interaction, for instance, is not just about the words spoken or the body language displayed. It's deeply colored by our past experiences and biases. These mental models help us predict what might happen next, giving us a sense of control and allowing us to function in a complex world. However, they also limit our perception because they narrow the scope of our experiences to what fits within our existing framework. New, contradictory information may be dismissed or ignored, reaffirming our sense of reality without ever challenging it. Take, for example, the way different cultures perceive time. In some cultures, time is seen as linear, a series of events moving from past to present to future. In others, time is seen as cyclical, with events repeating themselves in cycles. These different perceptions of time can shape how individuals in those cultures plan their lives, approach death, or even engage in relationships. Their reality of time, influenced by their cultural mental models, shapes their experiences and behaviors in ways that may be completely foreign to someone with a different mental model. Another aspect of perception that directly influences our reality is attention. What we pay attention to becomes our reality, quite literally. The human brain has a limited capacity to process information, so it focuses on specific things while ignoring others. This selective attention means that our reality is shaped by what we choose, or fail, to notice. Consider the famous invisible gorilla experiment. Participants were shown a video of people passing a basketball and were asked to count the number of passes. In the midst of the activity, a person in a gorilla suit walked across the scene, stopped, and even pounded its chest. Surprisingly, a significant number of participants completely missed the gorilla. Their attention was so focused on counting passes that they didn't notice something as blatant as a gorilla walking in plain sight. This experiment highlights how attention narrows our perception and influences the reality we experience. What we choose to focus on isn't purely a conscious decision. External factors such as stress, emotional state, and even personal interests can influence our attentional focus. For example, when we're in a heightened emotional state, whether excited, anxious, or fearful, we tend to pay more attention to stimuli related to those emotions. This means that our emotional state can distort our perception of reality, making us see the world through a lens shaped by our feelings, rather than objective facts. Memory also plays an integral role in shaping how we perceive reality. We often rely on memory to make sense of our experiences, creating a narrative that helps us understand who we are, where we've been, and where we're going. However, memory is far from perfect. In fact, it's highly malleable and prone to distortion. Events are often remembered not as they happened, but as they were processed at the time. Over time, memories can fade, merge, or even be fabricated entirely. The brain doesn't store memories like a video recorder, but instead reconstructs them each time they're recalled. This process involves filling in gaps and, in some cases, altering details to make the memory more cohesive. This phenomenon explains why eyewitness testimonies in criminal trials are so often unreliable. Each person's version of events is shaped by their perception at the moment and their subsequent recollections, which may be influenced by emotions, biases, and even the passage of time. Furthermore, memory can sometimes lead us to perceive things that weren't actually there. Our memories of past events can influence how we perceive new experiences, leading us to interpret them in ways that align with what we already know or believe. This is why people with different backgrounds and life experiences can interpret the same event in vastly different ways. Our perception of reality is not just influenced by external stimuli, but also by the internal workings of our mind, particularly through the lens of memory. Finally, it's important to recognize that perception doesn't occur in a vacuum. It is profoundly influenced by the social and cultural context in which we live. The way we perceive others, our surroundings, and even ourselves is shaped by the norms, values, and beliefs of the societies we belong to. This social construct of reality means that no two people have exactly the same perception of the world. For instance, how we perceive authority figures, such as teachers, parents, or political leaders, is influenced by cultural expectations and norms. In some societies, authority figures are revered and seen as infallible, while in others, they may be viewed with skepticism or as equals to those they govern. These social influences extend beyond authority figures to how we view gender roles, moral values, and even concepts like success or happiness. Cultural frameworks also shape how we perceive time, relationships, and identity. A person raised in an individualistic culture, where personal achievement and independence are highly valued, may perceive success in terms of personal accomplishment and self-reliance. In contrast, someone from a collectivist culture, where community and group well-being are prioritized, may perceive success through the lens of familial or social harmony. Perception is not just a passive reception of sensory information, it is an active process that shapes how we experience and understand the world. By influencing how we interpret and organize sensory data, perception creates our unique version of reality, which is often filtered through cognitive biases, emotional states, and societal influences. Understanding the science and psychology behind perception helps us recognize the limitations and malleability of our experiences, and it encourages us to approach our own understanding of the world with curiosity and an open mind. What we perceive as reality is not the full picture. It is merely our interpretation of it, shaped by countless internal and external factors. Our understanding of reality is largely grounded in our baseline state of consciousness. But when we shift into altered states, our perception of the world, and sometimes even of ourselves, changes dramatically. From meditative trances to dream states, psychedelics, hypnosis, and even the impact of fatigue or emotional upheaval, each altered state brings a unique lens to how we interpret our surroundings, ourselves, and the essence of reality. Now we'll explore how these altered states can manipulate perception, how the brain responds to these changes, and why they often lead to experiences that seem inexplicably real, though they challenge conventional logic. We'll also dive into the science and psychology behind illusions and how they can offer clues into how perception works and falters under varying conditions. Dreaming is one of the most common altered states of consciousness, yet it still holds many mysteries. During dreams, our brains conjure intricate and immersive worlds, merging fragments of memories, subconscious thoughts, and imaginative possibilities. These experiences can often feel as real as waking life, despite their surreal or illogical content. Dreams arise during the REM, rapid eye movement stage of sleep, where brain activity intensifies, mimicking the neural patterns of waking consciousness. This state allows for a freer, more abstract blend of thoughts, emotions, and sensations that are generally inaccessible when awake. This unique blend can lead to vivid, sometimes perplexing experiences, such as flying or reliving old memories. Despite their dreamlike quality, these experiences often feel undeniably real at the moment. Interestingly, the surreal nature of dreams raises questions about what constitutes reality and how our perception constructs it. For example, the brain areas responsible for rational thinking and self-reflection are often less active during REM sleep, which is why we rarely question the oddities in dreams. In this state, the brain disregards certain logic checks, allowing us to accept impossible situations as natural. This phenomenon hints that the sensation of reality may not necessarily rely on the external world, but rather on how the brain organizes and interprets information. Psychedelic substances such as psilocybin, found in magic mushrooms, LSD, and DMT, have profound effects on perception, often producing experiences that are radically different from ordinary reality. Users report visual distortions, such as seeing patterns or colors that aren't there, and they may also experience heightened emotions, a sense of unity with the universe, or encounters with entities that feel real. These effects occur due to the way psychedelics interact with the brain's serotonin receptors, particularly in areas involved in mood regulation, cognition, and sensory processing. Studies have shown that psychedelics reduce activity in the brain's default mode network, DMN, a set of interconnected regions that play a role in self-referential thoughts and the continuity of our sense of self. With the DMN quieted, the boundaries between self and environment often blur, giving rise to feelings of interconnectedness and ego dissolution. In these moments, many users report an enhanced sense of reality, as though they've accessed a deeper layer of existence that transcends ordinary perception. The study of psychedelics has implications beyond recreational use or even therapeutic settings. It raises profound philosophical questions about the nature of reality itself. If a substance can so completely alter one's experience of existence, it suggests that our everyday perception is only one version of many possible realities. Furthermore, some researchers propose that psychedelic experiences might provide insight into the brain's underlying mechanisms for constructing reality, as they reveal how susceptible perception is to biochemical shifts. Hypnosis is another fascinating altered state that impacts perception through heightened suggestibility. In this state, individuals are more open to suggestions, which can lead to profound changes in how they experience sensations, thoughts, and emotions. Under hypnosis, people have reported feeling pain relief, experiencing time distortion, or even undergoing vivid memories from their past as if reliving them. The science behind hypnosis reveals that it primarily affects the brain regions involved in attention, control, and self-awareness. Studies show that during hypnosis, the connection between the executive control network, responsible for decision-making, and the default mode network associated with self-reflective thought is disrupted. This makes the hypnotized individual less likely to question or reject suggestions, leading to an altered perception of reality. Hypnosis has been used to address various conditions, from managing chronic pain to alleviating anxiety and depression. Its efficacy suggests that our perception of pain, fear, or other psychological experiences can be highly malleable. If a simple suggestion can change how we experience pain or even make us relive past memories vividly, it demonstrates the flexibility of perception and challenges the notion of a fixed, objective reality. Emotionally charged states, whether extreme happiness, anger, sadness, or anxiety, profoundly influence perception. When emotions intensify, they can reshape how we view the world, people around us, and even ourselves. For instance, anxiety can heighten our perception of threats, making us interpret neutral faces as hostile or small challenges as insurmountable obstacles. Research shows that strong emotions activate the amygdala, a brain region involved in emotional processing, which then communicates with other areas responsible for perception and memory. This connection can amplify specific sensory inputs, making certain experiences or details stand out more prominently. Conversely, it can also create blind spots. Under high stress, people may overlook important details or fail to notice things in their environment altogether. The way emotions impact perception highlights the interplay between the brain's rational and emotional systems. When emotional states dominate, the brain prioritizes survival over objective analysis, filtering reality through a subjective, emotion-colored lens. This skewed perception can lead to misunderstandings, impulsive decisions, or even distorted self-image. Recognizing this interplay can help us manage our emotions more effectively, fostering self-awareness and a more balanced perception of reality. Visual and auditory illusions are another powerful reminder of how our perception can be deceived. Illusions occur when the brain misinterprets sensory information, leading to a perception that diverges from objective reality. These illusions offer valuable insights into how our minds process information and help identify the assumptions the brain makes when constructing our experience of the world. A classic example of a visual illusion is the Miller-Lyer illusion, where two lines of the same length appear different due to the placement of arrowheads at their ends. Despite knowing they are equal, our perception stubbornly insists otherwise. This occurs because our brains are wired to interpret the lines as representing different distances, even when that's not the case. Such illusions reveal the brain's reliance on learned assumptions about the world, assumptions that usually help us interpret depth and perspective accurately, but which can mislead us in controlled scenarios. Auditory illusions, like the famous shepherd tone, similarly exploit the brain's assumptions about sound. The shepherd tone is a series of overlapping tones that gives the impression of a continuously rising or falling pitch, despite looping repeatedly. This illusion tricks our brains into perceiving a sound that defies physical reality, highlighting how even basic aspects of our perception, like pitch or volume, are not purely objective. By studying illusions, scientists can uncover the shortcuts and biases inherent in our sensory processing. These insights reveal that perception is not an objective recording of the world. Instead, it's an active process where the brain makes predictions and fills in gaps, often based on incomplete information. Exploring altered states and illusions teaches us that perception is a dynamic, flexible process, one that's susceptible to internal and external influences. Whether through dreams, substances, emotions, or suggestive hypnosis, our perception can be stretched, shaped, and transformed. These experiences serve as powerful reminders that the reality we take for granted is not fixed, but rather an ongoing construction, influenced by biological, psychological, and social factors. This understanding challenges us to remain open-minded and curious about the nature of reality. While altered states can sometimes be disorienting or surreal, they also expand our awareness of what it means to perceive and to exist. By embracing the complexities and nuances of perception, we gain deeper insight into ourselves, the nature of consciousness, and perhaps even the mysteries that lie beyond our everyday experiences. In the end, perception is less about seeing the world as it is, and more about engaging with the endless possibilities of how it could be. The relationship between perception and consciousness lies at the heart of our understanding of reality and the self. Perception, essentially, the process through which we interpret sensory information, provides the content of our conscious experience. Without consciousness, perception would be mechanical, a series of unobserved chemical reactions and neurological patterns. Consciousness not only makes perception meaningful, but also brings a rich, subjective experience that gives depth to what we see, hear, and feel. In this chapter, we explore how perception and consciousness intertwine, examining various theories and scientific insights. We'll discuss whether consciousness is required for perception, the role of attention, and how different perceptual experiences contribute to our sense of self and reality. This exploration helps reveal how closely perception shapes not only our understanding of the world, but also our inner world. Perception is the process by which sensory information is transformed into meaningful experiences. Light entering the eye becomes color and form, vibrations in the air become sound. These processes are mostly unconscious, handled by specialized neural pathways optimized over millennia. Consciousness, however, introduces a layer of self-aware experience. It brings not only awareness of sensations, but also an awareness of self as the observer of these sensations. Most neuroscientists agree that consciousness and perception are linked, but precisely how remains debated. Some theories, like those proposed by philosophers such as Daniel Dennett, suggest that consciousness is an emergent property of complex neural processes, rather than an independent entity. Others, such as David Chalmers, posit that consciousness might be a fundamental property of the universe, distinct from perception itself. Understanding this link raises profound questions. Can we perceive without consciousness? And if consciousness emerges from perception, how does it do so? These questions lead us to investigate different perspectives and explore models that neuroscientists and philosophers use to examine perception and consciousness. To investigate consciousness's connection to perception, we turn to two prominent theories: the global workspace theory, GWT, and higher order thought, SHO-T theory. Global workspace theory, developed by cognitive scientist Bernard Bars, suggests that consciousness functions as a workspace in the brain, where information from various neural processes comes together. In this model, perception becomes conscious when it enters this workspace, making it accessible to other mental functions such as memory, attention, and planning. By accessing this workspace, certain perceptual experiences become part of our conscious awareness. For example, as you read this text, your brain filters out extraneous sensory data, such as ambient sounds, until it is relevant, such as a sudden loud noise, at which point it enters your conscious awareness. Higher order thought theory, meanwhile, proposes that perception becomes conscious only when the brain forms thoughts about it. For instance, if you see a painting and then consciously recognize it as beautiful, the brain has generated a higher order thought about the perception, creating a conscious experience. In this way, perception and consciousness are not directly linked, but become entwined through self-reflective awareness. Both theories attempt to explain the relationship between perception and consciousness by showing how specific neural processes give rise to our self-aware experience of the world. By bringing perception into conscious awareness, our brains construct an inner world that feels coherent and continuous, providing the groundwork for a sense of identity and purpose. Attention plays a critical role in transforming perception into conscious experience. While perception operates continuously, consciousness requires selective focus. Not every sensory input makes it to conscious awareness. Attention acts as a filter, choosing what information to spotlight and therefore what becomes part of our experience. Consider an example. When in a crowded room, you can focus on a single conversation despite the noise around you, a phenomenon known as the cocktail party effect. Although your brain registers the surrounding sounds, only the selected conversation reaches your conscious awareness. Attention, in this case, determines which sensory inputs become consciously perceived. Attention also determines the emotional and motivational significance of perceptions. If you hear your name spoken across the room, it immediately grabs your attention, pulling it into consciousness due to its personal relevance. In this way, attention acts as a bridge between perception and consciousness, selectively curating the information that shapes our experiences. Research in cognitive neuroscience shows that attention changes the brain's response to sensory input, amplifying signals related to attended stimuli while filtering out irrelevant information. This filtering process not only enhances perception, but also contributes to how we construct our conscious experience of reality. Qualia are the raw feels of conscious experience: the redness of red, the bitterness of coffee, the chill of a breeze. While perception delivers information about the outside world, qualia give these perceptions a uniquely personal quality. Each individual's experience of color, taste, or sound has a subjective aspect that remains deeply personal, even though the underlying sensory mechanisms may be similar. The nature of qualia challenges our understanding of perception and consciousness. Why does sensory information produce a subjective experience at all? If two people see the same color, they may agree on what it looks like, but each perceives it through a unique conscious lens. Some scientists argue that qualia emerge from the complexity of neural networks, but this idea is difficult to test scientifically. Qualia demonstrate that perception is more than a passive reception of stimuli. Consciousness adds layers of meaning to these stimuli, transforming them into experiences that we interpret emotionally and cognitively. Qualia, then, are the essence of why perception without consciousness would feel hollow. It would lack the vividness and meaning that comes from a conscious observer. When we enter altered states of consciousness, whether through meditation, dreams, or substances like psychedelics, our perception often shifts. These altered states reveal the malleability of perception and the deep connections between sensory processing and conscious experience. For instance, in meditative states, practitioners report heightened awareness and altered perceptions of time. Colors may appear more vibrant and sounds more intense, suggesting that different states of consciousness can intensify perceptual experience. Psychedelics offer another lens into this relationship. Users often report seeing complex geometric patterns or experiencing synesthesia, where one sense merges with another, such as seeing sounds as colors. These experiences suggest that conscious perception depends not only on sensory input, but also on the state of the brain. The study of altered states reveals how perception and consciousness can adapt to new frameworks, often producing experiences that feel as real as those in a waking state. This flexibility suggests that consciousness may not be entirely rooted in fixed neural structures, but could arise from the brain's ability to reinterpret and restructure sensory information. Understanding this flexibility enhances our appreciation of how perception and consciousness are deeply entwined, shaping our sense of reality. Linking perception with consciousness deepens our understanding of reality and self-awareness. Perception brings in the raw data of the world around us, while consciousness weaves it into a coherent narrative, allowing us to experience, interpret, and remember. Together, they form the basis of our experiences, thoughts, and identities. Our journey through theories of consciousness, attention, qualia, and altered states highlights that reality isn't simply what we see, it's also how we interpret it. Consciousness imbues perception with personal meaning, anchoring us in a subjective reality that feels consistent, yet is constantly evolving. Through perception, we build a bridge to the outer world, but through consciousness, we give it depth, color, and personal significance. This connection invites us to consider how much of our world is real in the objective sense, and how much is a creation of our minds. Perception is the cornerstone of how we interpret the world around us. It's the lens through which we construct reality, filling each moment with color, sound, depth, and meaning. Our senses provide raw data, but it's our minds that transform these inputs into coherent experiences, shaping how we view both the world and ourselves. Throughout our exploration of perception, we've delved into the roles of attention, consciousness, and qualia, showing how perception is not just a mechanical process, but a deeply subjective experience. By studying perception, we discover how flexible and selective it can be, an adaptable filter that not only reveals but also conceals aspects of reality influenced by our experiences, emotions, and biases. Perception allows us to interact meaningfully with our surroundings, yet it can also mislead us, showing how subjective reality can be. This flexibility challenges us to ask, what is truly real? Does an external objective reality exist, or is reality merely an interpretation shaped by the mind? Furthermore, altered states of perception and consciousness reveal just how fluid our sense of reality can be. In meditation, dreams, and even under the influence of psychedelics, our typical perceptions shift, offering glimpses of an unfamiliar reality that might lie beneath everyday experience. These shifts demonstrate that our view of reality is not fixed, but can change with altered states of consciousness. This raises profound questions about whether our waking consciousness captures the entirety of existence or merely a limited portion. Ultimately, perception is not just about interpreting the world outside. It's also about discovering the world within. Through perception, we explore our own consciousness, learn more about our values, and deepen our understanding of who we are. The journey of perception invites us to reflect on our place within the vast cosmos, and it challenges us to remain curious, open, and aware. As we close, consider this. Reality may not be simply what we perceive, but rather an intricate dance between what exists and how we interpret it. Our perception shapes our reality, and in many ways defines our existence. This power of perception encourages us to look closer, question more deeply, and engage more fully with the mysteries of consciousness and reality. Thank you for joining us on this journey through perception. If you enjoyed this exploration, be sure to subscribe to The Storyteller, like the video, and check out other thought-provoking content on our channel. Keep wondering, keep exploring, and remember, reality may be more than what meets the eye.